Richard Dawkins, The Selfish Gene. Delve into the captivating world of genes and their role in the evolution of life on Earth with Richard Dawkins' thought-provoking book, The Selfish Gene. Explore the concept of genes as the basic unit of evolution, their inherent selfishness, and their potential for near immortality. Through this enlightening journey, you will discover how genes cooperate to build organisms, how they interact with their physical and genetic environment, and the behavioral strategies they build within organisms. As you learn about these topics, the book also uncovers the fascinating area of cultural evolution, introducing the concept of the meme as a vital element in human culture.
Genes, the building blocks of evolution. Evolution is not solely dependent on individual organisms but on genes, the replicator molecules responsible for the continuity of life on Earth. Genes act as the basic units for evolution to occur, as they can exist as multiple copies in numerous bodies, making them near immortal and a potential target for evolution. In contrast, individual organisms cannot replicate themselves accurately due to the unique combination of the parent's genetic material during sexual reproduction. While genes can survive for thousands or even millions of years, individual organisms remain alive for only a few decades. Moreover, genes fulfill the criterion that most organisms evade, making them candidates for evolution to act upon. This is evident in the fact that all blue-eyed people have a copy of the blue-eye gene in their cells. Therefore, genes, rather than individual organisms, are the building blocks of evolution. The selfish gene. Genes act selfishly to promote their own survival without any conscious motives. The process of evolution appears to create entities suited for different environments, but it's not conscious of doing so. Genes come in pairs within chromosomes located in cells of organisms. Different versions of genes for the same characteristic are alleles, and any survival advantage gained by an allele is selfish and reduces the survival prospects of the other alleles. By definition, genes are selfish, and their survival success comes at the expense of other genes. The basics of genes. Genes, the building blocks of an organism's body, share a similar structure even though they differ in the information they encode. DNA, a long molecular chain made up of 4 molecules, A, T, C, and G, can combine to form unique and elaborate sequences that describe an organism's features. These sequences translate into instructions for building an organism's body. A slight variation in the code can cause distinct characteristics, such as longer legs or better survival rates. An antelope with long legs, for example, has a higher chance of escaping from a cheetah and producing offspring with similar traits. This way, the gene survives through its effect on the antelope's body, known as its phenotype. However, genes can have effects beyond the body they belong to, such as the virus genes that cause the host body to sneeze and enable the virus to spread. Therefore, a gene's phenotype in its environment determines its survival. Genetic success in survival. Genes and alleles play an essential role in determining the survival success of a species. The environment, both physical and genetic, influences the effectiveness of genes. A gene that works well for a particular species may not survive in another species' gene pool. The success of a gene primarily depends on what other genes surround it. Sexual reproduction leads to the mixing of genes, and each species ends up with a unique set of alleles. However, some allele combinations prove more advantageous than others. For genes to be successful, they depend on their specific environment and the presence of other necessary genes. For instance, a gene that allows an herbivore to digest meat would not be successful in a herbivorous species as they lack necessary genes for carnivore survival. Therefore, genes are not only influenced by the physical environment but also the genes surrounding them. The selfish gene and organism cooperation. Genes are fundamentally selfish and strive to maximize their production and survival prospects. However, genes within a single organism cooperate because they share a reproductive mechanism and have a common goal. This cooperation results in the formation of a complete organism that produces offspring carrying the same genes. On the other hand, genes of a parasite like a tapeworm do not cooperate with the host genes because they do not have a reproductive mechanism in common. While genes within an organism cooperate, individual organisms within a group do not have to cooperate because their genes do not share a single common pathway of reproduction. Rather, each individual should act selfishly towards others to ensure the production and survival of its own eggs or sperm. This explains why altruism can be a phenomenon. Genes and behavior. Genes form the behavioral strategies that help organisms survive in their natural environment. To adapt to environmental changes, intelligent organisms use two strategies: learning and simulation. Behavioral responses are guided by rules in genes that encode them, much like computer programs. With the unlimited number of situations presented, there is no prepared response that organisms can have for every one of them. While this rule-based programming helps organisms survive, it cannot always cope with radical environmental changes. Learning and simulation aid organisms in minimizing the negative impact of outdated rules. An organism that models the outcome of an action before taking it saves effort and avoids dangerous actions. Genes also build brains that enable organisms to respond to rapidly changing factors in their environment. The phenotype of a gene, such as longer legs, may take generations to prove more successful. Still, organisms must be capable of reacting faster to environmental stimuli, such as to eat, fight or flee in seconds, to survive. The reactions to these rapidly changing stimuli, which genes build brains for, are called behavior. Evolution of behavioral strategies. When it comes to survival, an organism's behavior can be just as crucial as its physical traits. Members of the same species compete directly for resources, leading to confrontations that prompt different behavioral strategies. These strategies can range from fleeing to fighting to the death. The success of these strategies is determined by how other organisms behave. Birds, for instance, have three behavioral approaches: doves, hawks, and retaliators. While doves run from attackers and hawks fight to the death, retaliators respond to attacks but do not engage in unnecessary aggression. In a population of retaliators, neither hawks nor doves would be successful. The retaliator strategy is evolutionarily stable. However, populations of hawks and doves are not stable because they can easily be invaded by the other. Competition between strategies ultimately results in a stable behavioral pattern in a population. Selfish genes and altruistic behaviors. The theory that genes control behavior and are selfish explains why organisms behave selfishly towards each other. However, there are seemingly altruistic behaviors in nature, such as devoted parental care, that contradict this theory. The reason behind this contradiction lies in the fact that genes exist in multiple copies in various organisms, and their program behaviors that benefit their copies. This means that even if it comes at the expense of their own organism, genes still benefit overall if it produces a greater survival advantage to the gene. Genes do not know whether another organism carries its copies or not. Still, organisms that are kin carry copies of their genes, so genes that program organisms to assist their kin acquire a survival advantage and lead those behaviors to survive successfully. On the other hand, altruistic behavior is not reciprocated equally. Parents behave more altruistically towards their children as they must ensure their offspring survives beyond one generation for their genes to survive. For the children, the survival and well-being of their parents are less relevant, resulting in an asymmetry in altruistic behavior. Thus, altruistic behavior is selfish at the level of the gene as it ensures the survival of the copies of that gene and explains the seemingly selfless behavior like parental care. The zero-sum and non-zero-sum game in nature. In nature, organisms either compete or cooperate for resources in their environments. The concept of zero-sum and non-zero-sum game is a useful principle to understand their interactions. In a zero-sum game, one side wins, and the other loses, like a cheetah chase to catch an antelope, whereas in a non-zero-sum game, both sides play against a bank of resources. Organisms can either compete or cooperate. While in some cases competition is a zero-sum game, in other cases, it can pay to cooperate with other species or members of their own species. Ants, for instance, milk aphids for their sweet secretions and offer protection from predation. This cooperation benefits both ant genes and aphid genes, resulting in an increase in survival and satisfying a selfish motive through mutual altruism. Mutual altruistic behaviors benefit host genes more than purely selfish behaviors. The evolution of culture. Humans possess a unique trait, culture. It encompasses various aspects of our lives that are not instinctive and not solely tied to survival. Culture is the equivalent of a gene pool, with individual memes as the smallest unit of cultural evolution. These memes can range from an idea to a clothing style, and are perpetuated through human communication methods. Memes compete for human attention and memory, forming complex entities, just like genes in an organism. Culture, separate from biology, explains human expressions that defy biological imperatives, such as celibacy. Memes survive within the culture they exist in, and like genes, their success depends on the environment they exist in. The internet fosters the creation and spread of memes, such as a popular clip of a dancing cat. Ultimately, human culture is subject to the same evolutionary forces as genes, where the most successful memes thrive. The conspiracy of doves. The book delves into the topic of behavioral strategies in populations, exploring the benefits of mutually altruistic strategies in achieving long-term gains. Using the example of two species, the hawks and the doves, the author demonstrates that the so-called conspiracy of doves, where individuals agree to behave like doves instead of hawks, can yield the most benefits for all. While genes lack foresight and cannot partake in this kind of agreement, humans, with their conscious foresight, have the ability to divorce themselves from gene selfishness and enter into mutually beneficial agreements. This can help overcome the downsides of biological gene selfishness, and potentially even lead to true altruism. The book encourages readers to use their foresight to enter into the conspiracy of doves for their own future benefit, and to counter the biological imperatives that may hinder progress.
In The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins profoundly illustrates the robust interplay between genes, organisms, and their environment, providing insights into the driving forces of evolution. At its core, the book emphasizes that the success of a gene lies in its capacity to survive and thrive within its unique environment, as well as in its ability to forge alliances with other genes to construct complex organisms. As we enhance our understanding of cultural evolution, we are introduced to the concept of the meme, highlighting the role of human consciousness and foresight in shaping culture and overcoming the self-centered nature of our genes, and eventually paving the way toward true altruism.